Welcome to GCSE 9-1 English Language. Thank you for logging in to this podcast. This podcast will provide you with more information about marking your students' mock exams and give you a taster of the training we are offering. We are offering 2 half-day training courses, one for English literature and one for English language. This training event is suitable for anyone teaching and marking the GCSE. During the training, we will cover the assessment requirements of the new specification, look at the new types of questions, review examples of real student responses to questions, understand how to use the mark scheme to mark your students' mocks. Paper 1 is the shorter of the 2 papers, at 1 hour 45 minutes, and requires candidates to respond to an unseen fiction passage from a 19th century text. We will briefly outline the features of the short questions, before focusing in more detail upon the longer reading questions 3 and 4, and upon the writing task, which is a choice between question 5 or 6. The paper begins with 2 lower mark tariff questions intended to build the confidence of candidates. Both questions assess Assessment Objective 1, which is focused upon identifying and interpreting explicit and implicit information and ideas. Both questions direct candidates to specific line ranges, and you should ensure that candidates restrict their responses to the given lines. The questions will always follow this format. Question 1 tests reading for explicit information, and candidates will always be asked to identify and select a particular word or phrase from the early part of the passage. In responses to question 1, candidates should copy down the word or phrase they have identified. It is not required to spell words correctly, but they must be recognizable to be given the mark. Question 2 is also assessing AO1, but now focuses upon interpreting the text for inferential information. Candidates may answer with quotations, as in question 1, but may also use their own words to explain their understanding of the text. We will now look at a student's response to question 3, so please refer to script 1. On question 3, candidates cannot achieve higher than 2 marks out of the available 6 if they do not comment on both language and structure. Answers do not need a 50-50 balance of language and structure, but must ensure that both elements feature strongly in the response. This is an important skill that centres must develop, and must make sure that their students clearly indicate in their answers that they are covering both elements. It is likely that many candidates will be relatively familiar with the language elements of this question, and it is the focus upon structure that they will need to develop. This response achieves 5 marks, placing it in level 3. Please note that there is only 1 page of answer space available, and so candidates must avoid introductions and quickly get down to the business of language and structure, as this response does. The opening is direct, with the first sentence identifying clearly the writer's feelings about Bertha. With their focus upon the use of repetition, the second and third sentences quickly make valid points about structure. However, the point about punctuation is not supported from the text. The mark scheme is structured around paired bullet points at each level, with the second of these looking to reward the selection of references to support the points made. The lack of supporting reference holds this answer back. At this point, the candidate has only written about structure, and so to rise above level 1, she must now comment upon language. The second paragraph sees a good language point about the use of pronouns, which is clearly made and well supported. Language comments are made in paragraph 4, with a comment upon the use of snake imagery, which is also clearly supported, and which shows a clear ability to analyze how language is being used by the writer to achieve particular effects. The answer concludes with a further comment upon structure, recognizing the use of internal monologue, though you should also note that the quotation chosen for support is not discriminating and does not adequately support the comment made. This response therefore meets all of the bullet points in Level 3. There is an analysis of both language and structure, including particular word-level features, with its comment upon pronouns, sentence-level features, with its comments upon the use of punctuation, and other language features such as imagery. The selection of references clarifies and supports points made, but the lack of supporting references on more than one occasion limits the final mark this answer can achieve. We will now look at question 4. This assesses AO4, the ability to evaluate texts critically and support with appropriate textual references. The mark scheme consists of 5 levels, and centres should note the relative importance of question 4 within the assessment of reading in this paper. At 15 marks, it far outweighs the 9 marks available for the total of the other 3 reading questions. It is important, therefore, that candidates are trained to use the mark tariff effectively, to judge the amount of time to spend on each question, and the nature of detail that is required in the answer. Please now refer to script 2. The opening paragraph analyzes the theme of dedication, which is directly relevant to the question, and supports with appropriately detailed quotations. The final sentence of the paragraph usefully anchors the response directly to the question asked, reducing the possibility of losing focus. The opening sentence to paragraph 2 is in danger of lapsing into narrative rather than commenting upon the importance of concentration. Although the use of double asterisks for parenthetical insertion is not a technique to be recommended, in this instance, it does enable the candidate to focus the comments made upon the questions set. This paragraph could have been improved by being more concise and by further developing the critical judgments made about the text. The final paragraph evaluates the impact upon the mental and emotional state of the narrator, which is a subtle and perceptive point to make. There is a suitably detailed level of support. To improve this, the answer needs to extend its analysis further and to show a more sustained series of insights. At the moment, the answer is somewhat short, and though it achieves level 4, it needs to develop in scope as demonstrated by the current support included in the answer. The final response to be considered is a writing response. Candidates must answer all of the questions on Section A, but may now choose between either question 5 or 6. This answer is marked for AO5 and AO6, and you should note the uneven weighting of marks between the two AOs, with 24 marks being given to AO5. I advise you to fully familiarize yourself with these two AOs, recognizing the importance of textual cohesion and coherence in AO5. For that reason, candidates would be advised to spend a little time planning their answer, so that they can ensure that their writing has shape and structure, and they know how to achieve this textual cohesion as they start to write. Please refer to Script 3. This response scores in Level 2 for both AO5 and AO6. Let us look at how this answer could have been improved. The opening sequence, with its use of slang, shows that it is not able to maintain a consistent register, as much of the rest of the answer is more formal in its tone. This type of answer, which uses a sporting success as its subject matter, can sometimes fall into the trap of assuming knowledge on the part of the reader, which they may not have. This occurs more than once in this answer, and it can be seen in the reference to points and goal difference in the opening paragraph. The opening does attempt to create some tension at the paragraph break, and does make use of a linking connective to help the clarity of communication. What is missing from this opening paragraph is any sense of character, and this is something that persists throughout the answer. The first paragraph had been accurate in its use of capital letters for the names of the respective football teams. However, in paragraph 2, this control slips, with capitals being used incorrectly on more than one occasion. We can assume that, as readers, we are supposed to be impressed by the achievements quoted at the end of paragraph 2. But in reality, we have no idea what these cups are and their relative status. And as such, the paragraph ends by not showing an ability to select material that would have suited the audience. This is the feature that would have raised this answer from Level 2 into Level 3, and we can see here how this response fails to do that. Paragraph 3 again shows the use of the connective, however, on more than one occasion, and the incorrect use of the adverb poor in the final sentence. Paragraph 2 is a single sentence that would have benefited from being split into clearer and more accurate units. Doing this would also have enabled the reader to understand what is a very complicated and very numerical point being made. Once again, these are the features that keep this answer in Level 2. Paragraph 3 sees the introduction of characters into the imaginative writing, with the mention of the key striker and the reference to the best mate. Successful characterization is the lifeblood of much imaginative writing, and is often the element that the reader initially latches onto, recognizes character types we have met before, and enjoys the manner in which characters develop and interact with one another. This paragraph is not able to develop its characters in any meaningful way. They do not even have names. Many writers use names to suggest certain things about the people in their stories, such as their appearance or their character, and it is a relatively simple technique to use. The references to 443 and 451 is further evidence of the writer not appreciating the mixed nature of the readership, and the need to explain more technical elements such as this. The answer seeks to create tension through its paragraphing, moving the reader to the day of the big game. However, the description of the game lacks excitement, because we feel little connection with the writer or the characters in the story and what they are trying to achieve. The end of paragraph 7 and start of 8 show an improvement in the quality of language, with a simile and an attempt at creating an emotional response in the reader. The sentence control at this point is not wholly secure. The response continues largely in this fashion to its conclusion, as the team win the league. In terms of AO5, it is able to make use of paragraphs, mainly appropriately. It expresses and orders information through a sequence of football games, leading up to the highlight of the final penalty, which shows an awareness of audience and purpose, but which is not able to meet the criteria for Level 3. There is a simple form of textual cohesion in this piece, as it sets out to chart the final games of the season and the tension around winning the league, and it maintains this focus throughout the response. On the other hand, it makes assumptions about its audience, which means that the tone and style often fail to develop a successful relationship with the reader. For this reason, it was given a lower Level 2 mark of 6. In terms of AO6, the response uses a range of correctly spelt vocabulary, and although there are errors, this is firmly in Level 2 and was given a mark of 5. Punctuation is used, creating sentences that are sometimes ambitious and not always accurate. However, they are seldom repetitive. There is some coordination and subordination, and although the connective however is used too often, it is effective as a means of joining ideas in the writing. Finally, notice how this candidate has written on every line of the available 5 pages. This answer would have benefited from more thought being put into the characters involved in the story, and in selecting the key events in the run-in to the end of the season. Both of these features would have enabled the writer to have made a better selection of material, and to focus more upon how the story was to be told, making use of a wider range of rhetorical features, and focusing more upon accuracy. Done successfully, these improvements could have enabled the answer to move from Level 2 to Level 3. We will now look at Paper 2. Specifically, the focus will be on covering the elements that are different to Paper 1. AO4, Evaluation, and AO5 and AO6, Writing, have the same levels and number of marks in both papers. For this reason, they are not covered here, but will be covered in the face-to-face training events. We will look at a response to Question 3, which assesses AO2. Both papers assess AO2 in Question 3, but Paper 1 has 3 levels and 6 marks, and Paper 2 has 5 levels and 15 marks. In this podcast, we will look at a Question 3 response to show the development from Paper 1. The main difference between Papers 1 and 2 is that Paper 2 requires the reading of 2 texts. There is therefore longer time for this paper, in order to give candidates more reading time. This should be emphasized to them. Paper 2 features non-fiction texts, one from the 20th century and one from the 21st century. On this paper, AO3, Comparison, and the second part of AO1, Synthesis, are assessed in Question 7. It is hoped that the short answer questions will build the confidence of candidates before the levels-based ones. And in Paper 2, these are assessing AOs 1 and 2. There are 2 questions on the first text, one AO1 and one AO2, and 2 on the second text, again one AO1 and one AO2. The questions will always follow this format. Questions 1 and 2 refer to Text 1. In responses to Question 1, it is not required to spell words correctly. And if two answers are given in one, for example, cigarettes and Bovril, this is acceptable for 2 marks. Question 2 is assessing AO2. Therefore, it asks for an example of language from the text for 1 mark, and a comment on how language is used for the second. The how is essential for the second mark, and must be related to the question. In this case, the writer's feeling for his wife. Questions 4 and 5 refer to text 2. Question 4 is assessing AO1, and it is important to ensure candidates are encouraged to identify the lines in their reading text insert, to ensure the correct ones are being used. The focus of this question is on how cooking has improved. Comments on how the people eating the food have changed are not credited, as this is not how cooking has improved. The message here is, of course, close reading of the question. All that is required for a mark here is identification of an example. Candidates can give a longer answer, such as, "It used to feel pointless and laborious, but now feels quick and delightful." But this is not a requirement given there is only 1 mark available. The mark could be achieved by just writing quick and delightful. In question 5, candidates are asked to comment on how language is used from an example already given for them. Hence, this question only offers 1 mark, and therefore repeating sections of the quotation would not attract a mark. We will now look at script 4, a response to question 3. In order to achieve higher than level 2 in this question, it is essential that candidates comment on both language and structure. This response achieves level 4. The opening to the response goes straight into identifying a structure point, the use of direct speech. This is sensible practice, as there is no need to start with an introduction, which may, for example, just repeat the question. The point made considers the use of structure to engage the reader by saying, "This makes the reader feel as if they know the writer," although this could be enhanced by acknowledging that in this case the reader is a single person, his wife. It is worth candidates considering who the reader of the text is, since this will impact on language and structure. There is another reference to structure in the explanation, level 3, of the use of rhetorical questions, although this is quite simplistic explanation, commenting that this engages the readers as they start to answer the questions and feel a part of the story. Candidates should be encouraged to consider more effects than just to engage the reader or make them feel involved. Explanation, level 3, of structure continues with reference to listing and an example, the toffee, milk, rice. The effect here is considered in more detail and touches on exploration, level 4, where it says, "The listing clearly shows how much he is loved by his wife, as she sends him so much food, and this shows the reader the connection they have, which will make them read more." The reference to "how much he is loved" and "the connection they have" explores the use of structure more than the previous examples. The candidate then moves the focus to language. Again, this is essential to move higher than level 2. The explanation, level 3, of the use of irony in the example, "We had a nice day," borders on exploration, level 4, as it reflects on the context of a nice day while soldiers are at war. The effect is explored more, level 4, given the awareness of the audience, as the candidate writes that this shows the writer cares for her and doesn't want her to worry. The comment that follows this engages the reader as they want to see the writer progress, is again a slightly superficial comment. The final language comment is again explained, level 3, in the context of war, and covers the use of irony in the example of the writer saying, "Never fear for my life," although the same explanation is offered that the writer does not want this wife to worry. The addition of the reference to the light heart tone adds more explanation of language, level 3, and links to the candidate's reference to the writer's death, as mentioned in the context paragraph about the text. This response meets all of the bullet points in level 3. Language and structure are explained, although in some places the explanation of how they are used to achieve effects is slightly superficial. The selection of references is appropriate and relevant. The response also has some exploration of a couple of points, which moves it just into the bottom of level 4, with a mark of 10. To achieve higher in this level, there would need to be more detailed reference to examples and more coverage of the text. In some cases, candidates only comment on certain sections of the text, when they should be encouraged to make full use of the extract. More exploration would also move the response higher. The next response to be considered is Script 5, a response to Question 7a. This is the first of the two-part Question 7, and it assesses A01 Bullet Point 2. This requires candidates to look at the two non-fiction texts together and select and synthesize evidence from these texts. In the case of this question, the focus is on what similarities the writers have. The indicative content in the mark scheme, for example, shows that a comment that both writers are head of their households, with examples, would be an appropriate similarity to offer. This response shows that the candidate is aware of similarities, helpfully starting sentences with both texts and furthermore both texts. The similarities highlighted are that both writers love someone close to them. Both suggest a traumatic experience. Both talk about food, and they both look at the emotional impact on the writers, in that they are grateful for what they have. These are detailed enough to achieve the lower end of level 3, and this response shows that it is not required to write a great deal. The response meets the first two bullets in level 3. However, there is not a great deal of evidence supplied to support the similarities. The first one, for example, does not have evidence to show the personal relationships, other than reference to his lover and her son. For this reason, Script 5 does not achieve full marks, but does achieve a mark of 5. There is no requirement to produce as many similarities as there are marks, as long as the similarities show understanding and synthesis of the two texts. In other words, they are balanced. This is enough. There could be, for example, 3 similarities with detailed comment and evidence. We have a second response to Question 7a. Please refer to Script 6. This response is included because the same candidate's response to Question 7b is also included in Script 6. This response is more on similarities between the texts than between the two writers of the texts. The response starts with a vague reference to the writers that both text 1 and 2 show similar emotions and feelings of love and care. This does not specifically reference the writers, but can be credited as part of the response. The response then goes on to comment on how Bert Bailey, in text 1, expresses love for his wife, and then how text 2 also conveys a similar effect. This second point is more relevant to the second part of question 7, which looks at how the writers present their ideas and perspectives. The response ends with another point which is more relevant to 7b. Another similarity presented in both texts is the use of longer sentences. The response for 7a, therefore, only shows limited understanding of similarities, with limited synthesis of the two texts and limited evidence. As it is, the response achieves 2 marks for 7a. The points made, however, can be credited in the response to question 7b. We will now look at 7b. This is the only question in the examination to assess AO3, which asks candidates to compare writers' ideas and perspectives and how these are conveyed across 2 or more texts. 7b allows for a broader commentary on similarities and differences between the 2 texts, specifically with focus on ideas and perspectives. Some of the similarities from 7a can be used, although the focus of this part of the question is different. Comparisons must be linked to the ideas and perspectives and the theme, language, and/or structure. Please turn to question 7b of script 6. The clear opening to this candidate's response sets up a first comparison, although it is not linked to the ideas and perspectives in detail. Text 1 has presented its ideas in the form of a letter, whilst text 2 has done so in the form of an introduction to a book. The second comparison is more focused on the ideas and perspectives of the writer. The theme of love and care. There is some relevant evidence from the text to demonstrate this point, although it is not fully supportive. There is balanced comparison in the reference to how text 2 demonstrates love and affection to her only son. There is clear, if general, comparison in the comment, the similarity of theme in both texts is represented in their writing. The response moves on to looking at a difference in the texts, that of the relationship between the writer and their loved one in each text. This is relevant as the candidate comments that in text 1, the writer's view is that he wants her to be happy and would like to take care of her and reassure her that he is okay. This is a relevant point, but could be illustrated more with evidence, as the reference to darling is the same as the example on the previous page. The comparison is lost a little here, as the ideas are slightly confused, that the relation of a mother-child comes one step after the relation of a couple. The comparison between the methods of survival is a little confusing. The conclusion is clear and relevant. On its own, this response considers some comparisons between the texts, level 2, and there is comment, level 2, and some explanation of ideas and perspectives, level 2-3. The selection of references is valid, but not always developed, level 2. Just considering what is written for 7b, the candidate would achieve the top of level 2. Together with the comparisons considered in the response in part 7a, This response then considers something of a range of comparisons between the texts, explains the writer's ideas and perspectives linked to theme and language and structure, and uses appropriate references from the two texts that are mostly relevant to the points made. The response achieves into Level 3 with a mark of 7, and more wide-ranging comparisons and more evidence would move it more securely into the level. I hope that this mock marking taster has been useful in understanding how the mark schemes have been applied to some genuine student work. For further support, we are offering a number of mock marking training events around the country that cover a wider range of exemplars. Please look online for more details and to book your place. Finally, to keep up to date with all of our upcoming events and our support for this qualification, or to ask any questions which you might have, please contact our subject advisor, Claire Haviland, using these details. Thank you for listening.